One of the signees, if you will, of the letter sent to the Congress of the United States, or sent actually to Jeb Hensarling and Senator Patty Murray, the respective chairs of the Joint Select Committee on Deficit Reduction. The letter is basically saying, please go big. All options for mandatory and discretionary spending and revenues must be on the table. He is one of those who has signed this, and he joins us now. He's a member of the House Armed Services Committee, and we're here to talk a little bit about some defense cuts and sequestration cuts and all of those exciting words that are very Washingtonian, but he can make sense of them for you. Representative Rob Andrews, Democrat from New Jersey's 1st Congressional District. Welcome back to POTUS.
Good morning, Tim. It's always good to be with you.
So there are, 140 or so of the members of the House who have signed this letter?
That's about right.
Yeah, and why did you sign it?
Because I think that one way we could create jobs in the country is to cut the deficit by $4 trillion. I think it would instill some confidence in investors and lenders and put people back to work.
I think you have some unique perspective in that you're on armed services as well as education in the workforce. So we're talking about, in a way, guns and butter.
Yeah, exactly.
That you're on both of them. So there's been a lot about defense cuts. If we could focus on that for a minute, there's been the rattling, if you will, of sabers, of maybe somehow eliminating these sequestration cuts, the ones that would be mandated if this super committee can't come up with a solution. That sounds like a bad idea.
I do think it's a bad idea to eliminate the sequestration. Let me translate that into English. That if the deficit committee fails to reach an agreement, there will be automatic cuts in the defense budget of about $480 billion over 10 years. But let me put that in perspective. We are presently planning on spending, probably the right number is about $8 trillion in defense over the next 10 years. So reduce that by a little more than 5%. How plausible is that? I think it's very plausible. If we have enough nuclear weapons, for example, to destroy the world 24 times over, why buy a 25th time? We are maintaining bases in Europe and the Korean Peninsula, which I think some bases are necessary, but I think we have too many. We waste an incredible amount of money on weapon systems that come in over budget and far past time. I think any credible person would have to say that we could get 5% out of the defense budget and not cut national security by a whit.
Given there's been also some discussion about how, and this gets into, I guess, more of an accounting procedure than others, but both Republicans and Democrats are counting savings on the war in Iraq and Afghanistan over the next 10 years, calling that $700 billion in savings. Is that really a savings when you weren't planning on spending it anyway?
I'm not counting on that, by
Okay.
the way, the analysis I just gave you. The core defense budget, Tim, if you take away all the money spent in Iraq and Afghanistan, all of it, has gone up by 40% since 2001 in real dollars. We have the same number of ships, the same number of planes, and the same number of people in uniform. So even if you don't count a dime of the Iraq and Afghanistan savings, what I'm saying is there's enough there to make a decent cut in the defense budget and help reduce the deficit in that way.
There are people who are using that, though, and trying to use that in the total. Is that a legitimate, accounting argument?
I don't think it's legitimate unless you expedite the withdrawal from Afghanistan, because the truth is that the withdrawal from Iraq and Afghanistan is already built into the basic budget numbers. So unless you expedite the withdrawal, which I'd be for, I think we should leave Afghanistan sooner rather than later. But unless you expedite the withdrawal, then you're double counting the savings.
I'm sure you've been very closely watching and listening to Leon Panetta, the Secretary of Defense, and his whole take on this, and he's very concerned about how it would threaten security, certain kinds of cuts. Do you believe he's talking about the kinds of cuts you're talking about? Is that a threat to the Defense Department,
I don't think. I think he and I are much more on the same page. I think what the Secretary is saying is that there are foolish cuts and there are more sensible ones. And what we can't do here is make cuts that defend the military-industrial complex but cut the basic strength of the country. There are weapons systems that are designed to fight the Soviet Union in a ground war in Europe. And in case there's a news flash for you, the Soviet Union evaporated in 1991. And although Russia is an interesting foreign policy problem, the prospects of a Russian invasion of Germany or France are pretty slender, I would say. So having a weapon system designed to stop that is a waste. I think we can find room to get rid of that and not in any way impair the real security needs of the country.
We've been reading so many things, Congressman Andrews, about what the Super Committee is up to, the Joint Select Committee on Deficit Reduction. Do you feel that the Democratic caucus is well informed? Are you understanding what the arguments are back and forth, or is so much of this behind closed doors that a lot of this is speculation?
Okay. We're quite well informed. Jim Clyburn and Javier Becerra, Chris Van Hollen have been in our caucus many, many times answering members' questions. I think we have a very good sense of what's going on.
And what is it that Democrats will draw the line in the sand on?
The wealthy paying their fair share of deficit reduction. I think there's many of us who are willing to make difficult decisions about entitlement programs and other domestic spending that we frankly favor, but we're prepared to make, as the president is, difficult decisions to reduce some of that spending if the wealthy pay their fair share. But we cannot tolerate, nor should we, an agreement that would say that the people who've gotten 93% of the income gains in this country in the last decade, 93% of the pay raises have gone to people at the very, very top of the ladder. To say that they should pay nothing more is unconscionable.
Who are the wealthy?
That's the line that we would draw.
How are the wealthy defined?
I would define the wealthy as people making more than $1 million a year.
And
although that number I just gave you is actually people making more than about $500,000 a year.
And what would their fair share be?
I think the president's idea of a surtax, a modest surtax on income in excess of $1 million a year is a good idea. And then we unpack that, again, translate it. That doesn't mean a tax increase on every dollar earned by that person.